Good evening, everybody. It's Tammy, and welcome to Gleneagles University live on Zoom. Tonight is Sunday, June 11th, 1 week, and we celebrate Father's Day. But tonight we're excited to have Anette Isaacs. She has been streaming to us for over 3 years now since the pandemic, and she's been talking to us all about Germany. And we're excited to have her back. And the good thing is that she's moved closer to us. And next season, we're going to see her in person. So this will be probably her last virtual lecture. And she's going to talk about the Traffic Light Coalition. But then again, it's open up to discussion, anything else that you want to hear about Germany. So Annette, it is so great to see you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Tammy. I'm so happy that I'm here and that you all are here too. So let me just share my screen. Okay, and I also wanted to let you know that I am, as Tammy already said, relatively close to you. I am in Aventura, which is about like 35, 40 miles away. And I am the director. I have a new job, basically. I am the director of the Lifelong Learning Institute at Florida International University, FIU. And they have a campus there in North Miami. And this is why I moved. I moved from Palm Beach Gardens down to Aventura. And today I'm so excited to actually talk about actually taking inventory of Germany's Traffic Light Coalition. And I have put together some, I think, very interesting information. And I just, like this afternoon, I was still working on it because I got some new statistics and I thought, oh, I have to really include this. So you are going to be really informed to the last minute, basically. But yeah, the Traffic Light Coalition, what an interesting word. I'm going to, of course, explain to you what that is. But of course, first of all, you are all aware of the fact that we have said goodbye. We have said auf Wiedersehen to this woman here, to Germany's first chancellor. This was in December of 2021. So after 16 years at the helm of Germany's government, she started her well-deserved retirement. And as you can see here, this is actually a poll that was done at our last election day, which was in September of 2021, where in an exit poll, people were asked, so what do you think about Angela Merkel retiring? And then here you say you have the result that 59% of people asked that I think it's a good idea that Angela Merkel's time as a chancellor is coming to an end. And speaking about the election, let's just kind of take maybe a couple of minutes in order to just review the events of the fall, because that is going to help us understand the current situation a little bit better. So here we have Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany, the official title of it. Right now, we have actually, it's interesting, there I say 82 million, but right now I actually heard that we are 83 million. So we have a lot of immigrants coming. And so Germany is not really very big. Germany is roughly half the size of your state of Texas, but it still is the fourth largest economy in the world, which is quite impressive when you think of it. And of course, we are a democracy with political parties. And I just wanted to kind of go over this in order to remind you, because I have been, of course, as Tammy said, I have been here before and we have talked about German politics before, but I just wanted to give you some pointers so that you know what these different parties are representing. So the first one is the Social Democratic Party. So that would be similar to your Democratic Party. And that is the oldest party in Germany. It's over 160 years old, which is really quite incredible. It was created in the industrialization era. And then to the right, we have the Christian Democratic Party, CDU, that's Angela Merkel's party. So these would be the conservatives. In Bavaria, that same party has a different name. It is the CSU, so Christian Social Union, but it is basically the same party. It's just that the people in Bavaria always want to be extra, as the young kids would say. They want to be extra. And so that's why they have the CSU. And these two parties always were, as we would call it, the Volkspartei, the party of the people. So usually in the last almost 75 years of the creation of West Germany, these two parties would have the overwhelming amount of the votes, like 80% of the votes, sometimes even more. Sometimes they would have like 40%, one would have 40%, the other one would have maybe 38%, and so on. And we, in our in our existence of West Germany, or the Federal Republic of Germany, we had 9 chancellors. And all of these chancellors were either members of the Social Democratic Party or the Christian Democratic Party. We have not had any chancellor from any of these other parties yet. So then we have the Grünen, the Green Party. And while I'm telling you this, please pay attention to the party colors, because this is important when it comes to the traffic light coalition, to that name, because the SPD is always red, the CDU is always black, and the Greens are always green. I mean, that of course makes sense because they are the environmental party. Relatively new, it was created in 1980. I mean, when you think of it, you know, the other one is 160 years old and this one is 43 years old. That is the party that of course, you know, their core competency is environmentalism, it is emancipation, it's very progressive, if you want to call that. And then we have Die Linke. We don't even have to actually talk about Die Linke, because Die Linke is the socialist party that didn't even make it into the parliament in 2021, because we have a rule, and that rule is that you could only be a part of our parliament if you have more than 5% of the vote. And if you don't have that, if you have like 4.9%, you're not going to get into the parliament. So that is why the Linke this time, they only had 4.9%. And so that is why they aren't even represented in our Bundestag, in the parliament that we have there in the capital city of Berlin. But how interesting is that, you know, that we do have, that we are apparently living in an era where people just aren't interested in socialism in that sense, you know, that the socialists are not speaking to the Germans. Then we have the yellow, yellow. It's another color that's important for the traffic light coalition. The Free Democrats, interesting. They call themselves the liberals, but not in your sense of the word, because in your sense of the word, they would actually be called the libertarians. So they are very business friendly. They want a tiny government, a very limited social net. And this comes from the fact that their voters mostly, you know, their members and voters are mostly people from higher classes. They are mostly wealthy. They're mostly healthy. And, you know, if you stand to inherit millions, then you might not need a health insurance. You know, that's how they are thinking. And then, of course, we have to talk about that last party, which is like the newest one. This is the one that only is 10 years old. 2013, it was created, the Alternative for Germany. And this is the one that is keeping me up at night, unfortunately, because this is a right-wing party, a populist right-wing party that comes close to the former Nazi party, actually, in agenda and sometimes also in rhetoric. And it's a shame, really. It's just like not even ashamed, but ashamed, as we would say, that you have such a party that is in existence in Germany right now, especially, of course, in light of our fraud history. So we could compare it to, in France, you have Marine Le Pen. So that would be the same caliber. And so these 6 parties are not the only ones that we have in Germany. We have like over 40 parties. But of course, as I told you, we have this 5% rule. So you have to have 5% of the vote. And if you don't have that, and these other parties are usually like little tiny splinter parties. And so that is why it's usually those 6 parties that we see here who have more than 5% and who then are able to work on coalitions. So, of course, our election day was September 26, 2021. So we are now in like half into the next cycle. And this is what the results were. So you can see that the Social Democrats had 25.7%. So they had most of the votes. But if you take a look at the Union, Angela Merkel's party had 24.1%. So it isn't a huge difference, right? But you also see that the Green Party was quite successful with 14.8%, which is really quite amazing for them because they are a relatively small party. They usually have 8%, 9%, and then to go up to 14.8 is pretty impressive. And then the Libertarians had 11. And then, of course, the AfD, that right-wing party, 10.3%. So, of course, you can imagine that this man, who was the leader and still is the leader of the Social Democrats, he was pretty happy because he realized that he was going to be our new chancellor. Olaf Scholz. Some journalists are nicknaming him Scholzomat because he is a little wooden. So he is from Hamburg, and people from Hamburg aren't like people from Cologne. People from the Rhineland are more like, whereas people from Hamburg are very serious. And so that is why I think people were thinking, oh, he's like a robot, and that is why they called him Scholzomat. And so the thing, of course, is, like in Israel, we also are a country that always has to have coalitions because you don't have this anymore, that you have a party that has more than 50% of the vote. And so you had a lot of different possibilities, as you can see here. And this is what you are seeing here with all these numbers. That is the number of the representatives who would be in the parliament. But the thing, of course, was that, as you know, we in Germany, after 16 years of having to live with Angela Merkel, we were ready for something else. So we didn't really want to have the CDU, Angela Merkel's party, involved in the coalition. And so it's very easy what we can see here. If you take away all the black in this slide, the only thing that you have left is the Ampelkoalition, which means traffic light coalition. And the name, of course, is reminiscent of a traffic light. It's the red for the Social Democrats, is the yellow for the Libertarians, and it's the green for the Green Party. But of course, you can imagine before this could happen, before these this coalition could be built, you of course have to have coalition talks. So first you have to have exploratory talks, then you have coalition talks. It is very difficult for the Green Party and the Libertarians to come to the plate together because they are very, very different ideologically. The Libertarians are like here, and the Green Party is here. And so that is why, the SPD is in the middle, kind of, and they always, the chancellor, the person who was going to be our chancellor, he always had to be like the moderator in these talks. There were several things that they were thinking about when it comes to the next 4 years, to these 4 years of a coalition era. And so one was, and this was something that our chancellor got through, so that was the minimum wage. We didn't really have a minimum wage that was so high. We only had about, I think it was like €9 or so an hour. And so now we are going to have a minimum wage, which will be €12, which is like a little bit more than $13 per hour. Then, of course, you know what this is. This is the Nord Stream pipeline. So that, of course, is a big issue that we had, because the Green Party is all about combating climate change, right? And really kind of closing down all the coal mines that we have. And we really were thinking, well, I mean, we're going to get very easy and very cheap gas from the Russians. Remember, this is all prior to February 2022. And so that's why we're just going to hold on to this pipeline that is kind of connecting us very closely to Putin. And we're going to get really cheap gas from Russia. And then we, of course, also are going to create a lot of wind energy, and we are going to really kind of just greenify, one could say, our country. So I would like to, in order to make this a little bit interactive, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions, and then you can see. It would be nice if we had a poll, but you can also kind of make your own decision, and then when I tell you what the real answer is, then you can keep score and can see if you were right. How many times does Germany's current coalition treaty mention the word climate? So that I thought was really interesting. Was it 12 times? Was it 37 times? Or was it 78 times? And the answer is, if you thought it was 78, then you were right, because it really, you have a document that is 120 pages long, and 78 times the word climate is being used. So that tells us something, because that really shows us that this new government is serious about making changes, in the former climate policies. And it also reflects the influence that Green Party has in this coalition, right? So then we, of course, in December of 2021, we had our big day, where the 9th Chancellor of Germany was being put into oath. So here we have him. And then here we have his coalition with the cabinet, with all the ministers. And I just wanted to introduce you to 3 people that are very important in this government in connection with the Chancellor, or in addition to the Chancellor. The one to the left is the finance minister, and that is a person from the FDP, so from the Libertarians, and his name is Christian Lindner. So he's from the Libertarians. And then we have a Secretary of State, our first woman, which is exciting. We have Annalena Baerbock from the Green Party. And then to the right, we have the Vice Chancellor and the so-called super minister. And the super minister is somebody who has 2 jobs. He is the Minister of the Economy and of the Environment. And Robert Habeck is also from the Green Party. So you have these 2 major politicians from the Green Party, and then you have the finance minister. What you can also see is that these are young people. So they are, Christian Lindner is in his early 40s, Ms. Baerbock is in her mid-40s, and then Robert Habeck is 53. So it's a new generation, and it also is a new era. As you can see here, a new era began. And so what is Angela Merkel doing now? Well, she's writing her memoirs, and she has a great pension, really amazing pension. But she does not have access to Air Force One anymore, like our German Air Force One. And so that's why she's flying economy, because this is who she is. She's, as you can see here, this is in March. where she was flying, I think, to Italy or so to have and this is actually, there she is with her husband. So everything is fine, you know, she is having a good time. And then, of course, we were happy that we have this new government. And then in the next couple of months, you know, after our new chancellor was being put into his position there, you can see his approval rating right there in December was pretty great. But then, you know, people were getting used to him a little bit, and they were thinking, why is he so wooden? Why is he, you know, not somebody who is, like, you would maybe call it a little bit, that might not be a nice word, but like a baby kisser, you know, like somebody who is like very gregarious. This is not who he is. This is not what Olaf Scholz is. But people were, as you can see here, from January to February, his approval rating was suffering a little bit. But the reason for this also had to do with this little nasty man right here, with Putin, who wasn't very nice, of course, as you know, and who was always making these kind of weird threats, who was saying things like, people, there are Nazis in Ukraine. And we were thinking, what is he talking about, you know? And so that is why then in early February of last year, we have 67% of people, you know, who were asked in this poll, who were saying, listen, our chancellor is missing strong leadership skills. And then when he heard that, Mr. Scholz said, you know, these are fighting words. I am going to go to Florida. I am going to go to Moscow, and I'm going to visit Putin. So here you see him at that ridiculously big table there. And so he's trying to talk some sense into Putin. As we know, this was not crowned by success at all, because on the 24th of February, the war started, which was 9 days after Scholz visited Putin. So now Germany, of course, as that country that made itself so incredibly beholden to the Russians and incredibly dependent when it comes to the energy supply, now we had a big problem, as this cartoon here suggests. So, of course, immediately the European Union was creating sanctions against Russia. And so Germany had to cut ties with that pipeline. And that led to very strange bedfellows, because here we have our green minister of the economy, Habeck, who quickly had to go to Qatar, to the Middle East there, in order to secure oil and gas, in order to keep the German economy afloat. And this, one has to say, really was the beginning of a roller coaster ride that this traffic light coalition had to get on. And it has not been able to get off it almost like more than a year later, because their political style is always a reactive one. It never is an active one. So they always have to put out a myriad of fires. They have to react to this terrible international crises instead of concentrating on what they initially wanted to do, you know, what they wanted to achieve in their coalition treaty. And in addition, so of course now there they are, you know, they really have a lot of problems, as you can imagine. And then, of course, in addition, the other thing that happened when the Ukraine-Russia war started was that the Ukrainians were coming to Germany. So we had a lot of refugees. Right now, we have over 1 million Ukrainian refugees who are living in Germany. And so the interesting thing about that was that they don't really need visas. So that is why they were able to just kind of come without having visas. And so here we have also another very interesting number. 84% of these refugees are women and children. And it happened so fast. Look, so these are numbers from March 2nd to March 17th, which really only is 15 days. So in a matter of 2 weeks, we have basically 0 people from the Ukraine to 187,000. And one of the things that we have in the in Germany, remember that when the wall fell, we had, of course, like 30 years ago. After that, that was also, when Germany got reunited, and then when the East Bloc was dismantled in a way. So you had a lot of Ukrainians who were coming to this country, to the United States. They were coming to England. They were coming to Germany. So we already have a community of about 300,000 Ukrainians who have been living in Germany for the last 30 years. So for example, this lady, she's a doctor, and she says in an interview, the refugees are always happy when they can speak Ukrainian with me. Also, you have a wave of help that was happening last year and is still kind of happening. So here you see, this is our European WhatsApp. It's called Telegram. And this is where you can see, these are all Germans and people who live in Germany who are offering private accommodations, who are offering if they have a spare apartment or they have a spare bedroom, they are offering that to the refugees. And this, of course, was not happening when the Syrians were coming in 2015. Also, we like, people who speak our language. So this lady here, you can see she is a German teacher. And so when she came to Germany, of course, we are looking for teachers. And so that is why we were, quite excited that she was there. And so we immediately gave her a job. And then if you take a look at this, what is this? Because not everybody got a beautiful apartment, not everybody got a nice room with a German family. Sometimes, because the Ukrainians are not the only ones who were coming. There were about 200,000 other refugees who were coming to Germany last year, and they were from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, from all over the world, sometimes from Turkey even. And so this is, of course, not very, very pretty, you can imagine. And so that is one of these, things, these, what is that called? Like
a modular.
A modular, yeah. Right. And you can see that they have not really a bathroom, but they have at least a sink there. Sometimes bunks in school gyms had to be used. And then this is from last time, from 2015, we were changing our Tempelhof Airport. This is where the Berlin airlift took place many years ago. And that was turned into a refugee shelter, and that has not been dismantled. This is 8 years later. It's still in existence. And you can see here, there is, Germans are helpful people, and so they were all there for the refugees. And although, we do have, over 1 million people who were coming, and then of, let's say, 1.2 million if we are adding the refugees who are coming from countries other than the Ukraine. We are, of course, then in a way also thinking that those people, once the war is going to be over, they might want to go back to their own countries. So here, currently, there are a lot of refugees, coming from crisis areas to Germany. What do you think? So this is another opinion poll that was done. And so they were asking this in 2016. That was the year after our refugee crisis, when the Syrians were coming. And then they were asking the same question in 2022. And so there you can see that the answers aren't so different from each other. So now you have exactly the same amount. You have like 55% of people say, yeah, we can actually deal with this influx of people. And then we have, Germany cannot deal with this influx. We have a few less people in 2022 who said that than in 2016. And then, of course, weiß nicht means I don't know. We had, now we have 5% who say, I don't know if we can actually do it. And in the last time they were asking it, like 7 years ago, people said, only 1% said, I don't know. I, of course, wanted to also show you this again, because this is the problem. This is why we are in this problem, because in Germany, we were for many years of the Merkel coalition, we were making these decisions, that kind of left us vulnerable, because we were saying, let's just depend on Russian gas because it's going to be so cheap and we need it and so on. And then, of course, we also were, to be perfectly honest, we delegated our energy supply to the Russians. We delegated our military and defense needs to you, to the Americans, because we knew that you were going to spend so much money on defense, then we can just kind of mooch, kind of sit next to you, And then we were also making ourselves economically beholden to the Chinese. And so this was this form of globalization that worked really well until it didn't. And so now, of course, we have some big wake-up calls. And one of the biggest wake-up calls is the exploding prices in the energy sector. And this is something that my generation has never experienced, because the electricity costs in Germany are at the highest level in history. It's really incredible. And there's another little question that I wanted to ask. So usually the average German household is paying about 100 euros per month for energy and electricity. How much did they have to pay per month since the war started? Is it 150 euros? Is it 200 euros? Is it 350 euros? And the answer is that from 100 euros, we're now down up to 350 euros. And this is something you have to see, that, of course, Germans don't really make a lot of money, because we have, in and of itself, Germany, of course, because of that social net, we have such high taxes that we are paying for health insurance, for the retirement fund, for the long-term care. Everything is taken care of, but of course we have to pay for it, right? And so that is why we easily pay over 50% of our income. The income isn't that ridiculously high anyway. And so now not everybody has another 250 euros lying around every month for a higher electricity bill. And this is something that especially is hurting small businesses. So let's take a look at this man here. I like a bakery, especially with like German baked goods. So he talked about the fact that inflation, that he was really, because he owns a bakery, and it's not a huge one. It's just like a nice, German small business bakery. And so the inflation, of course, I mean, I don't have to tell you anything about inflation. We, of course, here in this country also have high inflation. But he was talking about, some of the things that he has to deal with, like, for example, the heating oil. So in 2020, he paid for 100 liters, he paid 43 euros, and exactly that same amount of liters it's about, you can say about 28 gallons. 100 liters is about 29 or so gallons. Look at that, it went up from 43 euros to 151 euros. Butter, of course, you have to have butter if you want to bake something. 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds of butter, went up from 4.50 to 8.85. And then, of course, the most important ingredient in a bakery is flour. Also, look, it went up from $29 to $56. So it's really, quite difficult for, as we would say, like the small people to actually make ends meet. And so we know, of course, now we know that it wasn't a good idea, that Angela Merkel really bet on the wrong horse with this man when it comes to gas and our natural resources. But now, of course, we have to think about what are we going to do. So the most important thing that we are thinking is, well, if gas is so expensive, then we can't have gas, right? Then we have to have this. So we have to have a lot of sun, of wind energy and sun and all of this, like solar panels on our roofs and so on. But it's just such a mess because, first of all, who has the money to do that now, to kind of build that on their roofs and so on. And so that is why we in Germany, at the moment, we are really struggling, which is in a way so crazy because on the one hand, we are this rich country. We are the fourth largest economy in the world. But then the households really have a problem because the households that, as you can see here, 60% of all households are not able currently to save anything. So every penny that the household is making, they have to put back into, all the bills. And in 2021, it was only 15% of households. And now it's 60% of households. And we Germans are also big savers usually. So the saving quota was 16% in 2020, and now it's went down to 11%. And of course, the poverty rate goes up, in these sad moments, when of course, here you can see that from 2005, this is when Angela Merkel started her job as the chancellor. And then 2020 was, of course, when she then, 2021 is kind of when she said goodbye. But it went up during her tenure. And then you can also, what's so interesting always, when you look at these maps, the lighter colors are the areas where people are poorest, and the darker colors are where they have the most money. And if you look at the darkest, you can see that they are, of course, in the usual suspects. It's Frankfurt, it's, of course, Munich, it's Stuttgart, it's southern Germany. And where is it lightest? If you take a look at it, where is it lightest? It's all in the east. It's the former East Germany. So 30 years after the unification, we still have, a lot of poverty in East Germany, in former East Germany. And not only that, we also have a big discrepancy, a big inequality, one could say, that is happening, that we have these wealthy people, we have as we would say, the generation of the heirs, and there are a lot of them, like half of all West Germans are inheriting a lot of money, but unfortunately half of all of the other half of the West Germans aren't inheriting anything. And then, of course, the East Germans are really not inheriting anything. But then the half, the better half, they're the ones in West Germany who inherit a lot. And so I can see that from my own life. Unfortunately, I don't inherit anything, but I have friends who did get 400,000 euros for an apartment. They have like a master's in philosophy and don't have a job, but they have a nice $400,000 apartment in Berlin, because of their father and their grandparents and so on. So here we have some really kind of sad statistics. The richest 1% in German society owns more than 75% of the entire population. And, you know, when you look at all of this, you might say, well, I mean, we have that in this country too, but there's a big difference. So I'm going to tell you the big difference in a second. 50% of the population only owns 1.3% of the entire wealth. 40% of all Germans do not have any savings. And then 19% of the workforce earns below like 2,500 bucks. So if before, and this is before taxes, imagine that. This is per month, and this is before taxes. So after they have paid taxes, after they have paid their rent, a lot of people are working full time and they have like $500 to live on for the entire month. And of course, you can imagine that people are not happy about that. And so when you look at this, as I just mentioned, it could be that you're looking at this and you say, well, that's the way of the world. You know, the rich people have it all and the poor people don't. Yes, but we are in Germany, you know, that's the thing. We're not in America. We are in Germany, where we have this promise of equality. And this promise has been broken. And now we don't have that anymore, you know, and we are thinking, then why am I paying 50% of my income if that is what the reality is, you know? And so, of course, you know, 43% of Germans polled are assuming that their situation will become worse and their quality of life will decrease over time. So there is quite a bit of fatalism almost, one could say. And so here, 74% are of the opinion that the affluent citizens really need to pay higher taxes. And this guy says no, of course, because here we have him again, the finance minister from the libertarians. And the libertarians, as I mentioned, they are the ones who own everything, and they are the ones who don't want to pay more taxes. And he is fighting tooth and nail that we, as if I'm part of it, so that, you know, that the rich people are not going to pay more taxes. And so all of this, you can imagine, is driving people crazy. And so, you know, in Germany, we are having a tool that is kind of applied every week. And that tool is called the Sonntagsfrage, which means the Sunday question. And that is being done every week. So it's a demoscopic tool. And what happens is that every week, people in Germany are being asked, if our election would be next Sunday, which party would you vote for? And look at this. These are, like, as you can see here, June 10th. So this is very, very recent, just a couple of days ago, they were asked. And you can see that people are not happy about that Ampelkoalition, that traffic light coalition. Because nowadays, if we would have an election right now, look at that, 28% would actually vote for the conservatives. They would vote for Angela Merkel. And what really shocked me, look at the blue, look at the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, 18.5%. Up from like 10%. So it would be the third biggest party, which is really quite crazy when you think of it. And so here we have the change in comparison to the actual election results. What you can see here is that the AfD, you know, the blue really was gaining a lot of support. And the Green Party, look, is almost the same. People are not really crazy about the Libertarians either. Look, they had in 2021, they had 11%. Now they only have like 7%. But yeah, so why would you vote for the AfD? So this was another question that people were asked. And you can see And that's the thing that when you hear these think pieces by German journalists, it's all about placating. It's all about, oh, these are not all Nazis. These are not all Nazis. Well, and then they always say it's because of this. It's because of, look, you have 67% who say I'm considering voting for this party because I'm disappointed in the other party. So we have that here, 2 and 3 would say that, and then only 32% say that they are convinced supporters of the party. But if you ask me, this still doesn't make me happy. The fact that that people are unhappy about the coalition, and that is why they then would consider voting for a party that is democratic. I don't love that at all. And so here, the situation is even worse in East Germany, or former. We always have to say it's a former East Germany. Now it's, of course, now we can talk about it in geographic terms. It's the eastern part of Germany. And look at that. If they would vote today, thank goodness they don't vote today, because they would be 32%. And that would mean that they might even have a governor. If they do that, because we have like state elections too. We have 5 different German states. And if we would have a governor from the AfD, I mean, this is it's pretty serious. I find that pretty serious. But look at the SPD. Only 16% of the former East Germans would actually vote for our chancellor right now. And the Green Party, the Green Party never really had a lot of success in East Germany. And this, of course, comes from the fact, if you are relatively poor, you don't really care about the climate, because you have to care for food, for shelter and so on. So you could tell, our chancellor isn't in a great position at the moment. And so the other thing also is that we are also fighting, about what are we going to do with the Ukrainian war? What are we going to do with Putin and so on? And Scholz is very hesitant. He is a member of the Democratic Party, of the SPD. The SPD per se is a pacifist party. It's not a party that is a hawkish party, and so he does not like the idea of sending tanks to the Ukraine, but we are still doing it. So that this is what was decided in early spring, that we are sending Leopard tanks. He was not happy about it, and because not everybody in Germany wants to send tanks there, we have a big peace movement, as you can see here, make peace without weapons. And so that is why, as a chancellor, you have to be, of course, a chancellor for all Germans and not only for the people who vote for you. And so that is why he then decided, well, I'm just going to see how many tanks other countries are sending, also the Americans. And so here, this is an interesting summary of how many of these tanks the European Union has. And so you can see that Greece has a lot of them. Greece and Spain. Greece has 353, Spain has 327, the Turks have some, Poland has some. And so that's why we were, hoping that maybe you could send some. So that is why in March of this year, Biden met with Scholz, and then here we have the result of that meeting, that Biden said, okay, we're going to send our Abrams tanks, and you are sending the Leopards, and then we can help, we can help the Ukrainians. And here we see him, visiting the troops. This is not like troops in the Ukraine. These are German soldiers somewhere in Germany. So here we have one of the biggest problems that we are having when it comes to this whole idea, of kind of fighting and being members of, like peacekeeping missions and all of that, is we don't have a lot of soldiers. And who did that? Mrs. Merkel again, because 10 years ago, her government decided that we are going to end conscription. And so young men in Germany don't have to go to the army again or anymore. And so that is why the German army went from 500,000 soldiers down to 183,000. The equipment is in such bad shape. For example, we only have currently 6 submarines left. Can you imagine? Germany, 6 submarines we have left. And of course, we also don't have a lot of soldiers. And when it comes to the fighter jets, that's so interesting, because usually you would think that if you were a man, like a 20-year-old man who has watched Top Gun movies, you would think that could be an awesome job, right? To be like a fighter pilot. We don't have anybody who wants this particular job, because right now, half of all fighter jet positions, like pilot positions, are vacant because nobody wants to do that. And we also, have this, we have a new guy, because we had actually a woman, we had a female Secretary of Defense, and she was very wrong for that position. And so the good thing is that now we have a man who's more interested in it. But let me ask you, in case Germany would have to go to war, how long would our military's ammunition last? So if now, we have a war, it's starting tomorrow, and we now have to fight, is it 2 days? Is it 2 weeks? Or is it 2 months? And the answer is, I'm afraid to say, 2 days. Can you imagine?
Oh my God, I was hoping at least 2 weeks.
Yeah, don't tell him. He was like, what? 2 days? How interesting. So it really is quite incredible. And so we have this going on, but there's so much. Our situation in Germany is so complicated, because on the other hand, we still have the Green Party. Remember, the Green Party is all about peace. It's all about, we are not going to buy one weapon. We're going to work on speed limit on the Autobahn, because then, maybe we can fight. We can combat climate change. So, there's just, people are on such different planes, basically. And what we had to do in the past couple of months, because of the fact that we don't have any electricity, is that in Berlin, in many other cities too, we had to, save electricity. And so that is why the city of Berlin had to kind of turn off their lights, for these important buildings. And look at this. This is the Brandenburg Gate, obviously, one of the most visible landmarks of Germany. And so let's say you are a woman, and you are walking home at night. How fun is that, to actually walk home at night realizing that this is happening? Look at that. This is happening in the biggest city of all of Germany. I don't even want to kind of think about that, to kind of walk home because the government doesn't have money to leave the light on. On the other hand, we have my friends, just because they are only children, they don't have any siblings, they are inheriting millions. No, I mean, it's a good thing that I'm not bitter at all, but it is, we are kind of stepping on each other's feet, because it would be important that people who have so much money and who are inheriting a lot, we don't have inheritance tax. We don't have, wealth tax. We don't have all of this because it was all eroded in the past, in these 16 years where the conservatives were in power. And it's tough, And so before I'm opening this up for questions and comments, I just wanted to kind of give you maybe a little bit of a summary in terms of how can we assess the last kind of 18 months of that traffic light coalition. Well, I would say the first picture that comes to mind is headless chickens, because they are all kind of running around like headless chickens because of all of the previously, mentioned crises that our politicians there had to react. I mean, what would have happened if Putin would not have started the war with the Ukraine? We would still get our gas from Russia. The Brandenburg Gate at night would still be lit. And we would be able to kind of deal with our goals that we had in the coalition treaty to kind of, our quest to combat climate change. And so all of these goals that the government had, like turning off, closing down our coal mines, we had to keep those open, turning off our nuclear power plants, we kept those open, because we are so desperate for affordable energy. In a world without war, we would not have had all the refugees, 1 million Ukrainians wouldn't be in Germany. So it's all that, would have, could have, but on the other hand, what is also not really helping is, and I don't have anything against Chancellor Scholz, I like him, but he's not making it easy because he's just not a passionate and an empathetic person. He's not a great communicator. He always thinks that he is, but he kind of isn't. And yes, Angela Merkel also wasn't an embodiment of charisma, of outstanding rhetoric, but this is what you have to have. You have to have the ability to communicate with us Germans, and in many ways he just isn't doing that. And so if you had asked me, what do you think, what would be the light on the traffic light? If you had asked me that for, like, let's say 3-4 months ago, I still would have said, yeah, we have to give them a chance, because on the other hand, it is so interesting that we have these 3 politicians, these 3 leaders of these 3 different parties that are so different ideologically from each other. And the fact that they are coming together every day in Berlin and they are trying, to work together, to encounter each other and to work hard to solve our problems, we should really give them, the green light. But I would say nowadays, because things really have become quite difficult, and especially when you think of it, that the Germans are so fed up that many of them are considering voting for the AfD, I'm personally quite shocked. And so I'm changing my result, and I'm saying yellow. I'm still not in the red. I'm at yellow, and I'm hoping for better days. So I thank you so much for your time and your attention. And I'm going to stop the share so that we can have some discussion. And I hope that you have a couple of questions for me.
Wow, what an eye opener.
Yeah.
I get my question is, it's just so bad that I guess I want to ask the Kavanaughs this. I mean, were you aware? They are big into history. So, Mr. and Mrs. Kavanaugh, were you aware of how this was affecting Germany right now? Do you mind answering that, Mrs. or Mrs. Kavanaugh? I'm going to ask to unmute you if you can give us your opinion of what's happening in Germany.
I don't know how to answer the question there, but the question I had, your statement about the 2 days of ammunition, is there any sense of, given the fact that they're a year into this war, let's call it a war, is there any sense of urgency about gearing up? I mean, it sounds like that they were going from like zero to, and that's,
yeah, it is. It's so interesting. I think when it comes to this, when it comes to, it kind of feels as if we Germans, we are college students, and you Americans are our rich parents, and we are just like partying. And then we are calling our rich parents and saying, could you maybe help us with kind of buying me a couple of textbooks? And what about next month's rent? So I think we are still really delusional. We are still thinking that the Americans, because and I have written this down, your defense budget is $700 billion every month, every year, whereas in Germany, our defense budget is 47 billion. And the Chinese, by the way, their defense budget is 200 billion. But the Americans are definitely spending most money. And so that is why I think there is no sense of urgency. There is it really looks terrible, 2 days. But on the other hand, we are still, we still haven't sent the Ukrainians a lot of tanks because we're like, we would have to make them first. Maybe in 2 years we can do it. I mean, it really is quite remarkable that Germany, that my country is slacking so much at this point. So the biggest like domestic issue that they have right now is the fact that our green government, our kind of green minister there, says that from 2024 on, if you need a new heating system for your apartment or for your house, you cannot have oil and gas. You have to have renewable energy, and that is called a Wärmepumpe. It's some kind of pump, kind of some new invention. And this is what everybody has to have now. And it costs about 20,000 euros. And Germans are like, how am I going to pay for it? This is, nobody's talking about the Ukrainians. Nobody's talking about weapons. Nobody's talking about anything. Everybody's talking about, where do I get this new, heating system? And who is paying for it? That's like the biggest. And that's the thing, in times of crises, people are really going inward and they're like, okay, so how can I make sure, that my apartment is heated and that my family has health insurance and so on and so on. And that is why they are interested in that party that is populists. List, and that is saying, make Germany great again. We don't pay anything for refugees. We take all our money for ourselves, because this is what this AfD stands for.
Yeah.
I'd like to say something if I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in Germany as an adult in the late 60s and early 70s. And I am shocked by what you are saying. I remember back then, the Deutschmark was four marks to the dollar, was a strong currency, almost as strong as the Swiss franc. There was a high, there was employment. The products being made in Germany were top notch. The people had a great lifestyle. But now I see the reverse has happened. Even with the German banking system, Deutsche Bank and KMZ, which were, when I was there, they was solid as a rock. And now they're having problems. And also having had contact with the German military. I mean, I'm just shocked that a nation can just have a 183,000 soldiers. And I think one of the reasons is that for years and years, they depended upon the United States
Exactly.
for their protection.
Right.
I mean, I remember back then in the 60s and 70s, you had 250,000 Americans stationed in Western Germany.
Right.
And so they depended on that. And that's how their industry grew over time. But I think now it's a different world, it's a different environment. And I think that first they should consider reintroducing conscription to have to build up their force.
Right.
They also have to increase their armaments. It's just mind-boggling when I'm hearing how I have these memories of, the Germans had a phenomenal economy. They were driving Mercedes-Benz, which they would buy, in cash. They didn't take a loan. And they were living quite well in homes, apartments. And it's just a shock that Germany, unfortunately, is almost turning into a third world country, which has such a great workforce. And it's just mind-boggling. So
Right.
that's my thoughts.
To your point, when it comes to the workforce, our problem is we don't have it anymore because we have, I think every year, 900,000 people die because this is what is usual is that about 1% of your population is passing on. But we only have 700,000 babies that are being born.
Mhm.
And of those babies, about over 40% are not German babies. They are babies from foreigners that are
Sure.
living in Germany. And
Right.
so we have, first of all, we have this big gap of 200,000 people who just aren't there anymore. And then so first of all, we have that going on. And now we have baby boomers who are kind of gradually getting out of their jobs and they are retiring.
Mhm.
And so, it was so ridiculous. When I moved here, so here to this apartment, to this condo, I'm renting a condo. And so the first thing that I realized was that my oven wasn't working. And so I was calling because I then called the guy who owns this place. And then he said, talk to Total blah, blah. And these are people who are going to come to you and they're going to repair the oven. And then I called them and then they said, we could come in 2 weeks. And I said, 2 weeks, this is ridiculous. And then I thought, as a German lady, they should have to come tomorrow. They can't come in 2 weeks. What am I going to do in 2 weeks? So I then called friends of mine in Germany. And I was like, can you imagine these people here in Miami? They come in 2 weeks. And then these friends in Germany say to me, you can be happy that they come in 2 weeks. You have no idea what's going on in Germany now. You can be happy if they come in 2 months because we don't have any people anymore, who even if you had the money for one of these new heating systems, you would not find one. And even if you found one, you would not find a craftsman that would actually come and install it because we don't have anybody anymore who wants to work in these jobs. I mean,
Now, what about the issue? I remember back when I was here, you had a large Gastarbeiter population. At that time, many of them were for Turkey.
Oh,
You
the
have
guest
the same
workers.
same situation with the Gastarbeiters,
Yes.
where you have people coming in who don't become German citizens, but they actually work and they do a lot of work. I remember when I was there, they did a lot of work in the factories and everything of this nature.
Yeah, yeah. So that's we do. It's very interesting because the first guest workers really came in the early 1960s. So we have about 3 million Turks. We have, I think, we are outside of Turkey. We are the country with the biggest Turkish community, and it is so interesting that. Now that Erdogan, was having this election again, I think it is like half of them, about 1.5 million, don't have the German citizenship. So they have been living in Germany for like 40, 50, 60 years, and they don't have German citizenship. They have their Turkish citizenship. And so that is why they were able to vote. And that's kind of strange, when you think of it. And so, so they are, many of them are integrated. And so now you can see that, like, for example, 20 years ago, when I was working for Rhodes Scholar, formerly Elder Hostel. And there you would see that Turkish people were people who would kind of clean houses and so on. They would work in factories. And now, when you are, when you're reading articles or you are seeing interviews, and so you see that they have moved up. It's more like the second, third generation. They are teachers, they are professors, they're, some of them are politicians and so on. So yes, so we do have that going on, but we also, unfortunately, when it comes to graduation rates of high school graduation, and so they are still lagging behind.
We're talking about the difference in the equality between the East and West Germany. About 20 years ago, I was teaching in Berlin, and one day we just got in the car and drove over to the eastern section to the border, and it was amazing the difference. And so now that was 20 years ago. And I think I'm hearing you say, has anything changed? Is there any degree of investment, and why hasn't that part of the economy, I'll just call it wealthier?
Well, it has. Well, I have a whole presentation about, the unification and the aftermath of the unification. So that's like another hour that we could actually spend on it. But the thing is that, the East Germans are just, although, if you take a look at Dresden, at all of these beautiful buildings, everything is like, East Germany is a little bit like Disneyland now, because everything is beautifully renovated and gorgeous and so on. But the people still feel very left out, and they are left out, when it comes to judges. Only like out of 200 judges, maybe 3 are from the former East Germany. Professorships, maybe like 5% of all professors are from the former East Germany. When it comes to our ambassadors, like not even 1% of our ambassadors are from the former East Germany. So the West Germans came into East Germany in the early 1990s, and we took it all over. And so many, 80% of all women, like 60% of all men lost their jobs. There were these transformatory processes that were just kind of making people that were kind of leaving generations really without perspective, without direction. And that would not be my generation, because I was like in high school, when the wall fell. And so we had the whole world was our oyster. We were then able, I mean, I'm not from East Germany, but everybody who was from East Germany, who was maybe 16 or so when the wall fell, they were able to study everywhere and go to the university in Paris or whatever, or America. But their parents, were the ones who were maybe 40 or maybe 45, and they lost their jobs and they never were able to get another footing again, in our workforce. And so now, of course, they have been poor. They have been living on social welfare for the last 20, 30 years. So that is something that is scary. And then 2015, we have the refugee crisis, where then 1 million people from Syria are walking into Germany, and the East Germans, who are always thinking that they got the short end of the stick, they are thinking, what's with that? Why do they get that? And why do all of a sudden these refugees get apartments, and I don't, and so there's a lot of
really asking is that that 20 years ago I saw what that looked like, and that was a long time after the wall came down. And hasn't there been investment in manufacturing, or wherever it would come from, either the German or outside of Germany?
The thing about that is that, yes, there has been a lot of investment, but they're all subsidiary firms, or subsidiary entities of big West German companies. Like we have Volkswagen in Saxony, we have Porsche near Dresden and everything. But of course, all the money that these people are creating, or all the cars and everything, and all the profits that they are creating, are not benefiting East Germany. They're benefiting Stuttgart, because everything goes to the headquarters. Everything goes to Mercedes in Stuttgart or to Porsche in Stuttgart. And so the West Germans are they are owning everything, and the East Germans are working. And so the other thing is that in the 1990s, the West Germans were kind of running into East Germany, buying all the apartments. And so there was recently, there was something, like a documentary about East Germans. And there was this East German woman who was saying, what's interesting, 30 years after the unification, the only time when I see a West German is when I have to pay my rent because a West German owns my apartment, or when I go to work because a West German owns my former company. And so that's, all of that is really driving the East Germans crazy, you can imagine. And then now, with this wave of inheritance, which is driving us all crazy, all of us who don't inherit, we're like, and this, I think, really also leads to awkward moments, because I do have friends, the ones who were benefiting so incredibly from their parents, from their grandparents. They are, of course, feeling awkward too. They're feeling awkward about the fact that now they have all this money and they haven't done anything for it, but they are certainly happy that they got it. But now they have to face all of their friends who didn't get anything, so it's an awkward situation all around. And then the real kicker is, this is some other issue, is that our most important industry in Germany is the car industry. I mean, we have been for over 130 years. We just love a car and everything, and all of our car companies with all of their might, all of their power, their economic power, they really dropped the ball on the electric cars, because they always thought, oh, you know, this is a fad. This isn't interesting. And so now,
Are you saying that the, the Porsche and BMW and all that, those are all West Germans that are doing the labor
yes.
manufacture? They're
No,
not-
it is the East Germans are doing the labor, and the West Germans are the ones who are the stockholders, basically.
I understand that, but what I'm trying to get to is that, where, I can understand if, your guest workers, they work there and maybe they're sending money home. And so it's leaving Germany. Now, is that I understand that the car companies are owned either, what do you call it? No, not West German, but the stock, stock.
Yeah.
But the people do the labor are making money. And so you're saying that.
Well, but the thing is that one of the biggest issues is that they still thought that for the longest time that they didn't have to invest in electric cars, and so even and if they were doing it, they were doing it in these, like, for example, there's an electric Audi that starts at $90,000. I mean, who is paying that? Who in Germany would have the money to pay for a $90,000 car? Or Volkswagen, their beginner model when it comes to electric cars is 40,000, and that's still, and so now recently the Chinese have told our German car companies, listen, if you are not sending us electric cars, keep your gas guzzlers. We don't want this anymore. And so now, of course, our car companies and you had the same thing happening like 30, 40 years ago with Detroit, because our car companies have very powerful unions. And while the owners of the car companies are like, what are we going to do? The union leaders are still thinking, I think we would like to have the 4-day week, and we would like to have like this and that, and more holidays and more money and so on. So there's also there are parts of like groups of Germans who are just like with their heads in the clouds, and then others are like, yikes, what are we going to do?
Is all this going to hurt tourism?
I don't think that's going to hurt tourism. It depends on what the tourists want to do, because the thing is, when it comes to the cultural aspect, so we were talking, in the beginning, we were talking a little bit while we weren't talking about our lecture there, we were talking about the fact that I love opera, and of course I come from a city, Berlin, that has 3 opera houses. And so we in Germany, we actually are the country with most opera houses in the entire world. We have over 130 opera houses, and all of this is being paid for by taxes. And so, of course, all of this it's going to be a little bit on the chopping block if we don't have a lot of people who are having jobs, who are paying a lot of taxes, so we can take the taxes and give it to the opera houses, and so on and so on. So it's all a cycle. And, then let's just kind of bring it together, this idea of we have 200,000 people who are missing, right? Because they are dead and the other ones aren't being born. So what are we going to do? We have to get more people. We have to find people who want to live in Germany. And so that is why our progressive parties are saying, well, we have to get the immigrants. Every immigrant is a gift. And then you, of course, have the AfD who is like anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic, anti-everything. And they're like, no, we don't want anybody. We only want blonde people with blue eyes. I mean, it's really, it's a mess.
But going with the immigrants, and they could be a big source of jobs and for manufacturing, for tourism, for everything, if they were educated, especially in the German language.
Right.
And is any effort being done to educate the immigrants? Because a lot of them speak a language that is totally foreign.
Right, exactly. That's the other problem, that we are doing that. We have hundreds of thousands of people in language classes, but German is a difficult language. And in some cases, people are coming to Germany who are 48 years old and are illiterate, so that is very challenging to do anything with those people. So we also, when it comes to the Syrians, we also have, of course, some who are super bright and who were in medical school in Aleppo, and then they come to Germany, and a year later they're in medical school in Hamburg or something. But that's not really happening too often. And then the other thing is, we would love to have somebody who has a PhD from MIT. That's what we like, somebody who is like 30 and knows how to speak German and is super educated. But of course, if you are such a high qualified person, you don't come to Germany, where you have to pay over 50% in taxes. You, of course, come to America, where you make $300,000 in your 20s. That's another thing. We are, because of the language, because of, at times people are racist. I could not at this point, if there would be a person of color who would say, I'm a computer programmer and I have a job offer in Dresden, in Saxony, where, are we still recording? Because this is something, this might be fighting words, but people in Saxony are not the nicest ones, and they have a neo-Nazi scene and so on. And I would be worried for that person of color, to kind of walk around in Dresden and not be harassed. And it's, that's the other thing,
Amazing. Anybody else have any comments or questions for Anette? Well, Anette, this was amazing. I cannot wait to go ahead and send the link out to some of the members that were not able to make it this evening. Thank you so much for enlightening us on what is happening in Germany right now. So everybody, appreciate you giving us an hour and a half of your time on Sunday. And it's good to see everybody from near and far. And I hope everybody's having a great summer. And Anette, I will we'll talk offline and get you a schedule when you can come back here in person. So
yes,
thank
perfect.
you so much, everybody.
Right.
Good night. Have a great evening.
It was good.
Yes, I'm going to stop the recording right now.